He had been stuck at the early core formation stage for a long time. It was precisely because of this that he had lost his status as an inner sect disciple and was eliminated, eventually becoming an outer sect steward. Wang Lin's rapid cultivation progress gave him a glimmer of hope. The lives of outer sect disciples are of no concern to the sect. If they die, they die. And this person is just an independent cultivator. Once he's dead, no one will come looking for him. Qingmu, don't blame me. If you want to blame anyone, blame yourself for cultivating too fast. If you had reached the core formation stage, even if I wanted to take action, it would have been troublesome. But now, killing you is as easy as flipping a hand. The middle-aged man leaped and flew towards Wang Lin's cave mansion, arriving in an instant. The surroundings were eerily quiet. As soon as the man reached the cave, he paused in surprise. Normally, when a cultivator was inside, the heavenly chasm stone would be lowered to seal the cave. But now, the stone was only half lowered, not fully shut. Skipping the use of the jade slip to open the heavenly chasm stone, the middle-aged man's gaze flickered. Though he sensed something was off, he still didn't take the late Foundation establishment cultivator lightly. His body flashed, and he entered the cave. The moment he stepped inside, he saw Wang Lin sitting cross-legged on the stone bed, his gaze calm as he looked at the man. The middle-aged man's eyes flickered, and without a word, he formed a hand seal and pressed forward. Immediately, a green light appeared silently, flickering towards Wang Lin. He had no intention of killing, but rather planned to capture him, interrogate him, and then kill him. Wang Lin's eyes showed a trace of mockery. He tapped his storage pouch, and the forbidden banner immediately appeared in his hand. With a flick, a wave of restriction chi howled out, lightning fast, and almost instantaneously collided with the green light. The green light was unable to resist and immediately shattered. Seeking death, the middle-aged man sneered, spitting out a 3-inch flying sword. With a flash, it shot towards the restriction chi. In his mind, a late Foundation establishment junior could never stop the power of his golden pill-refined sword. But his smile quickly froze. Under the impact of the restriction chi, as soon as the flying sword made contact, it snapped in half with several cracking sounds. When I was cultivating, you hadn't even been born. Wang Lin on the stone bed shook his head and sighed. The man's face turned pale as he spat out a mouthful of blood. Without a word, he turned to flee. However, the restriction chi flickered, immediately wrapping around him, pulling him back. As the middle-aged man opened his mouth to speak, Wang Lin waved his right hand through the air. With a loud slap, the man let out a pitiful cry, his entire right cheek puffing up as he spat out blood mixed with broken teeth. I am from the soul refining sect. The man groaned in pain, his heart filled with terror. But before he could finish, Wang Lin waved his right hand again. The man cried out in pain as his left cheek swelled up. A look of madness flashed in his eyes. In all his years of cultivation, he had never suffered such humiliation. I'll fight you to the death. Explode, the man shouted, and his golden pill began to crack, his eyes bloodshot, staring fiercely at Wang Lin. A pity about the golden pill explosion, Wang Lin muttered. With a flick of his wrist, the forbidden banner glowed with black radiance. 3 waves of restriction chi shot out and entered the man's body in the blink of an eye, wrapping around the golden pill that was about to self-destruct. In the man's stunned expression, the golden pill was forcefully pulled from his body. Wang Lin grabbed the golden pill, glanced at it, and swallowed it in one gulp. The man trembled, spitting out a large mouthful of blood, his body instantly weakening. Inside, he screamed in madness. He's not at the Foundation establishment stage. He's definitely not at the Foundation establishment stage. You, who exactly are you? The man's spiritual energy dissipated along with the golden pill. He gritted his teeth and asked, his voice trembling. You don't deserve to know. Wang Lin moved, appearing in front of the man. With a touch on his forehead, the man's eyes widened as his vitality slowly drained away, and he collapsed lifelessly to the side. Wang Lin shook his head. He hadn't wanted to kill him, but the man had insisted on seeking death. With a slap to the man's body, his form instantly disintegrated into dust, vanishing completely. Wang Lin stepped out of the cave and immediately headed towards 743's location. Outside 743's cave mansion, Wang Lin waved his right hand, and a restriction flew out, landing on the heavenly chasm stone. His body turned into a streak of white light and entered the stone. As soon as he made contact with the heavenly chasm stone, his form disappeared, only to reappear inside 743's cave. This kind of teleportation was the result of the restriction. Who? A shocked cry came from inside the cave. The burly man, sitting cross-legged on a stone bed, had an incredulous expression. But as soon as he saw it was Wang Lin, the man's anger flared. Yet, in an instant, it felt as if cold water had been splashed over him, and he immediately sobered up. He didn't realize Wang Lin had come using a restriction. What was on his mind at this moment was the word teleportation. Senior. His voice trembled. Before he could finish speaking, Wang Lin had already appeared in front of him. With a single motion, the man immediately collapsed, losing consciousness. Without sparing him a glance, Wang Lin waved the man aside, his gaze fixed on the wall to the right. After a moment, Wang Lin's eyes flickered, and with a wave of his right hand, a flying sword shot out from his storage pouch. With a flick of his finger, the sword slashed towards the wall. The sound of shattering stones echoed, and before long, a hole large enough for a person to pass through appeared in the wall. Wang Lin's body moved, following the flying sword, and entered the hole. The flying sword led the way, with Wang Lin following behind. In a short while, a passageway more than 30 zhang long formed. At the end of the passage, a place glowing with sparkling crystal light appeared. Spirit Stone Mine. Wang Lin's eyes flashed, and a trace of joy appeared in his expression. He pointed at the flying sword, and immediately, the sword buzzed, as if it possessed intelligence. It quickly flew back to him, and in the blink of an eye, it returned to Cave 743, stabbing into the ground beside the unconscious man with a loud pop. Instantly, the flying sword shattered into countless fragments, which scattered around the man. A restriction seal immediately formed, enveloping the man. At the end of the passage, Wang Lin pressed his right hand against the stone wall beside him. At once, the stone walls began to writhe in an eerie manner. Before long, the passage behind him vanished without a trace. Even from inside Cave 743, no trace of the passage could be found. Wang Lin made a hand gesture and cast a restriction on the Spirit Stone Mine. Using the power of the restriction, he dashed forward and disappeared from the Spirit Stone Mine. When he reappeared, he was deep within the mine. At this moment, he was at the bottom of the entire mountain peak, surrounded by countless spirit stone mines. Overwhelming spiritual energy surged wildly around him. This energy couldn't be directly absorbed by cultivators due to the impurities contained within it, and it required some basic transformation before it could be absorbed. However, this only applied to low-level cultivators. For Wang Lin, it was of no concern. The concentration of spiritual energy here had formed a pressure similar to the spiritual pressure emitted by high-level cultivators. But this pressure was naturally formed, and its power was clearly far greater than that of any cultivator's spiritual pressure. Within this pressure, Wang Lin was immediately enveloped, and the strength of the pressure felt as if the entire mountain was pressing down on him. But unlike a mountain pressing down from above, this pressure came from all directions, from every inch of muscle in his body, relentlessly crushing him. A series of crackling sounds echoed from within his body, but Wang Lin wasn't worried. Instead, he was filled with joy. This was the powerful spiritual pressure he had been seeking. Under this pressure, he immediately sensed that his collapsing essence spirit was beginning to slowly condense. Let's do this. Wang Lin's eyes flashed. 3 supreme spirit stones flew out of his storage pouch, landing around him. Taking a deep breath, he shouted, and with a series of loud explosions, all 3 spirit stones self-destructed. The spiritual energy, now pushed to its limits, erupted violently, blending with the spiritual pressure. The spiritual pressure Wang Lin was under instantly increased several times. Blood poured from Wang Lin's 7 orifices, but his eyes were filled with ecstasy. Almost there. He gritted his teeth, and 2 more supreme spirit stones flew out of his storage pouch, exploding with 2 loud bangs. It was as if water had been poured into a boiling pot, and the entire mountain's spiritual veins began to boil. The spiritual pressure bearing down on him surged wildly in that instant. Under this immense pressure, The shattered fragments of Wang Lin's essence spirit gradually began to consolidate, as though a broken mirror was slowly being reassembled. At the same time, an immense amount of spiritual energy surged into Wang Lin's body, even overwhelming the T in tent and the ceiling obstacles, which were directly smashed apart. Instantly, Wang Lin's cultivation began to recover at an astonishing speed. Perfect late foundation establishment stage, shattered. Core formation, complete. Early core formation, shattered. Mid-core formation, shattered. Late core formation, shattered. Early nascent soul, shattered. The spiritual veins of the mountain began to dim visibly, starting from the root. The shimmering crystal-like spirit stones quickly turned to ash and spread out rapidly. 10 breaths. Only 10 breaths. In that short span, all the trees that had just sprouted on the mountain withered and fell. The entire mountain's spiritual veins darkened and disappeared, leaving no trace of spiritual energy, becoming a waste vein. At this moment, thousands of outer sect disciples in the mountain opened their eyes from meditation. They immediately noticed that the spiritual energy in their stone chambers had vanished without a trace. Still in shock, a massive pulling force suddenly came from the ground beneath them. The spiritual energy within their bodies began to drain out wildly. In their panic, these outer sect disciples frantically used their magic tools and fled from their caves, not daring to stay any longer. At the base of the mountain peak, atop the spirit vein, Wang Lin suddenly opened his eyes. His body moved, and with a flash, he vanished from within. When he reappeared, he was already standing outside the mountain peak, surrounded by many outer sect cultivators. They were all discussing fervently, their faces displaying lingering fear and shock. The voices Wang Lin heard were all speculations about this strange event. As for the reckless man, Wang Lin's mind moved, and the restriction was lifted. The man flew out from his cave dwelling. As soon as he saw Wang Lin, panic struck him. However, under Wang Lin's cold gaze, he immediately showed a respectful attitude, not daring to make a sound. At that moment, a gaze fell upon him. Wang Lin turned his eyes toward it and saw a beautiful woman in the distance, nodding slightly to him with a faint, friendly smile. Wang Lin furrowed his brow, too preoccupied to pay attention to her. He shot a cold glance her way and then withdrew his gaze. Peak mid-nascent soul stage. I didn't expect that in this single move, I would regain such cultivation. But more importantly, my essence spirit has already started to gather. Although it's not complete, I can already use my conceptual realm. Wang Lin took a deep breath, his expression calm. More than this, the insight gained from going through life and death was what he truly valued. The dramatic changes at the mountain peak drew the attention of the inner disciples of the soul-refining sect. Almost immediately, 3 people flew out from the inner sect. Among them was an elderly man with graying hair, exuding an air of authority. He shouted, "Everyone be quiet." "Where is Lu Fulin?" the old man demanded. After a long pause, no one responded. His brow furrowed, and he, along with his 2 companions, flew into the mountain peak. Lu Fulin was the middle-aged man who had earlier been overtaken by greed. As for these 3, they were inner disciples of the soul-refining sect, as well as outer sect stewards. Wang Lin's gaze flickered imperceptibly. Among the 3, the old man was at the early nascent soul stage, while the other 2 were at the late core formation stage. After entering the mountain, the old man flew out alone after a short while, his face clouded with displeasure. There was a trace of confusion in his eyes, but more than that, there was shock. All outer sect disciples, remain here and cultivate. No one is allowed to leave. The old man's eyes flashed as he shouted. Then, he slapped his storage pouch, immediately bringing out a jade slip and offering it. The jade slip turned into a stream of light, flying quickly into the inner sect of the soul-refining sect, vanishing from sight. Most of the outer disciples were filled with astonishment, but some ignored the situation, continuing to sit cross-legged in meditation. Wang Lin was one of them. Sitting cross-legged on a large tree branch nearby, he regulated his breath and focused on cultivating. After the elder had used the jade slip, his sharp gaze swept over the outer disciples one by one. He had entered the mountain with his 2 companions, and upon inspection, he was horrified. The entire mountain's spirit vein had been completely depleted, becoming a waste vein. especially after entering the depths of the spirit vein crystal mine. When they touched the stones, they shattered instantly, clearly due to the spiritual energy being absorbed. This situation was bizarre. Since the founding of the soul-refining sect, he had never encountered such an occurrence. His gaze moved, sweeping over the outer disciples without stopping. When it passed over Wang Lin, he thought little of him, judging his cultivation to be nothing more than late foundation establishment, unworthy of special attention. Now that Wang Lin's essence spirit had somewhat recovered, unless it was a spirit transformation cultivator, no one could see through his cultivation. Before long, more than 10 sword lights flew out from the inner sect, arriving near the elder in the blink of an eye. These figures turned into individuals, all with sharp eyes. Among them were 5 nascent soul cultivators, while the rest were at least mid-core formation stage. There was also a middle-aged scholar, a late nascent soul cultivator, dressed in a black robe, exuding a chilling aura, as if countless vengeful spirits were swirling around him. As he stepped out, the temperature around him dropped. His gaze was like lightning as he coldly examined the mountain peak and said in a deep voice, "Junior brother, what did you discover after sending the jade slip?" The previous elder immediately adopted a respectful demeanor and replied, "Third brother, the spirit vein of this mountain was instantly depleted and has become a waste vein. I suspect it has something to do with these outer disciples." The middle-aged scholar's eyes flickered, and he barked, "Seal off the surroundings. If anyone makes a move, kill them on the spot." Then, he glanced at the elder again and added, "Junior brother, come with me up the mountain to see the sect master." With that, he moved, transforming into a rainbow and heading straight for the soul-refining sect's inner door. The elder hastily followed behind, and within moments, the two had entered the inner sect. Wang Lin's expression remained unchanged, his gaze calm. He shot a cold glance at the guards around him. At this moment, if he chose to act, he could summon the mosquito beast and escape instantly. However, unless absolutely necessary, he didn't want to give up such a prime cultivation spot. Though his essence spirit had recovered somewhat, it was not fully gathered. After attempting to retrieve the heavenly reversal orb and failing, he hesitated for a moment. Wang Lin chose not to act hastily. At this moment, the sky began to brighten. The first rays of dawn gradually rose, casting warmth across the land as the light drove away the darkness. As the surroundings became clearer, a middle-aged scholar in robes flew out from the inner sect of the soul-refining sect. Trailing behind him were 9 others, all clad in crimson robes. They varied in age, but one thing was the same. A dense swarm of vengeful souls encircled each of them. From afar, under the flickering sunlight, they exuded waves of violet-black mist, rising like overwhelming demonic flames. "Everyone, divide into 10 groups for inspection," the middle-aged scholar commanded coldly. The 9 crimson-robed cultivators behind him stepped forward. With a synchronized gesture of their sleeves, several streaks of red aura suddenly surged outward, landing on the thousands of outer sect disciples. Instantly, the disciples were involuntarily separated into 10 distinct groups. Including the scholar himself, each of the 10 crimson-robed cultivators took charge of one group. One by one, they began summoning the disciples for inspection. They didn't even ask questions. Each time a disciple stepped forward, the examiner would place a finger on their forehead. Within a few seconds, it was someone else's turn. Wang Lin was placed in the 3rd group. His expression remained calm, betraying no emotion. These 9 cultivators were all at the mid-nascent soul stage. But since Wang Lin's essence spirit had partially recovered, he didn't take them seriously. Each time a disciple passed the inspection, they let out a sigh of relief. As time dragged on, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. Suddenly, in the 4th group, a cultivator in a green robe moved, fast as a meteor, bolting backwards in an attempt to escape. The inner sect disciples of the soul-refining sect had been watching closely. As soon as the man made a move, a cultivator at the mid-core formation stage stepped forward to intercept him. "Out of my way!" the green-robed cultivator shouted, slamming his right hand forward. A surge of power exploded outward, forcing the core formation cultivator to stumble sideways. Without hesitation, the green-robed man dashed forward, almost escaping. Just then, the crimson-robed cultivator overseeing the 4th group let out a quiet command, and extended his hand into the air. "Come back." Immediately, 5 streaks of black light shot from his fingers, streaking like lightning and piercing into the green-robed cultivator's body in the blink of an eye. The man cried out in pain, his body going limp. With a flick of the crimson-robed cultivator's hand, he was dragged back from afar and tossed into the center of the open area. The crimson-robed cultivator didn't even glance at him, simply said, "Next." The remaining Outer Sect disciples grew increasingly uneasy, especially those with hidden motives who had snuck in. Many now wore expressions of fear. At that moment, the crimson-robed cultivator overseeing the 8th group narrowed his eyes. He glanced at a pale-faced disciple beneath his finger, who looked as if he were about to beg for mercy. With a sweep of his hand, he flung the disciple into the central area. Gradually, more and more disciples accumulated in the center. Soon, their number had surpassed 30. In the past, we only used this method to inspect disciples who earned the right to enter the inner sect during the grand competition. Today, you Outer Sect disciples get the same treatment. "You should consider it an honor," said the crimson-robed cultivator from the 3rd group as he flung another disciple into the central area. Wang Lin's expression remained unchanged, though he found it all quite intriguing. The soul-refining sect was certainly peculiar, so many Outer Sect disciples with hidden agendas. But with such a thorough inspection, none could escape scrutiny. As for the burly man who had once occupied Cave Mansion 743, Wang Lin had previously left a restriction seal in his body. He wasn't worried it would be discovered. Although his cultivation hadn't fully recovered, the intricacy of his seal was far beyond what these nascent soul cultivators could detect. Wang Lin found the man rather amusing. Outwardly, he appeared to be at the late foundation establishment stage, but in truth, he had reached the early core formation stage. Still, among Outer Sect disciples, concealing one's cultivation was nothing unusual. "You step forward," called the crimson-robed cultivator in charge of the 5th group, pointing at the burly man. The man shuddered and quickly stepped up. The cultivator pressed a finger to the man's forehead. After a moment, he gave a wave of his hand. The man let out a long breath and moved aside. He dared not meet Wang Lin's eyes, standing still with a mix of dread and confusion. Just now, the instant the elder touched his forehead, he had felt a chill surge through him. His mind went blank, as though an invisible hand was rifling through his memories. The sensation was fleeting. Before he could even process it, the chill receded, returning to the point on his forehead where the elder's finger had touched. Before long, it was Wang Lin's turn. The crimson-robed cultivator overseeing the 3rd group placed a finger on Wang Lin's forehead. After a moment, he said, "Next." Wang Lin's expression remained calm as he stepped aside. By midday, all the thousands of Outer Sect disciples had been inspected. In the end, more than 100 had been thrown into the central open area. "Have you found anything?" The middle-aged scholar tossed the last person from his team onto the open ground and asked. "Aside from these individuals with ulterior motives, we haven't found anything related to last night's events," said one of the red-robed cultivators coldly. The others also shook their heads. "You Outer Sect disciples, go and cultivate on the nearby peaks. Arrangements will be made for you." The middle-aged scholar pondered for a moment before instructing. The Outer Sect disciples who had been inspected respectfully departed, flying off towards the surrounding peaks. As for the over 100 people on the empty ground, no one paid them any attention. No one cared about their fate. On a slightly shorter peak nearby, Wang Lin had been assigned a cave mansion. He sat cross-legged inside, his gaze flickering. "My cultivation has recovered to the mid-nascent soul stage. Although absorbing the spirit vein has been effective, it's too dangerous. If done too frequently, it might attract the attention of a spirit transformation cultivator or an infant metamorphosis monster. I've already drawn attention, so I can't try it again. However, when I absorbed the spirit vein earlier, I discovered that there's a larger main vein here, not just a branch of the main vein. The main vein is in the inner sect of the soul refining sect. If I can get there and find an opportunity to absorb and exhale the energy, I should be able to recover my cultivation in one go. Even if I'm discovered and an infant metamorphosis monster attacks, I'll have a way to escape. Worst case, I can tear open a rift and leave with the star compass." Wang Lin pondered for a while. He knew that the soul refining sect was part of a level 5 cultivation nation and was certainly guarded by an infant metamorphosis cultivator. With this thought in mind, he had already made up his mind. Besides, the soul refining sect specializes in crafting soul banners as their primary technique. Although cultivators from Vermilion Birdstar also possess techniques for collecting souls and refining banners, they're not as powerful as those from the soul refining sect. If I can learn how to use the wandering soul technique to craft a banner, it will certainly be no less powerful than a forbidden banner. Wang Lin's eyes flashed. With a wave of his right hand in front of him, a series of shadow restrictions immediately shot out, binding the surroundings. He then patted his storage pouch and took out a piece of immortal jade that glowed with a faint white light. Though the jade was chipped, its immortal power remained unchanged. Now that my cultivation has recovered to the mid-nascent soul stage, I can once again forcefully consume a piece of immortal jade to break through the T, intent, and seal. Wang Lin fell silent for a moment, broke off a piece of the jade, took a deep breath, and placed it into his mouth. Immediately, unimaginable pain surged within him. At this moment, in a valley outside the immortal ruins in the Chu Kingdom, the sound of a silvery laugh echoed, accompanied by the disgruntled roar of a tiger. The valley was lush with spring greenery, the ground covered with vibrant grass. Zhou Ru, dressed in a floral coat embroidered with peonies and red pants, with 2 small braids on her head, was sitting on a tiger covered in black stripes. She laughed. "Little White, you didn't listen to me. Tonight, I'll punish you by making you eat with chopsticks." The tiger roared, its voice tinged with a sense of sadness. For the past year, it had been tormented by this little devil, even waking up from nightmares at night, where the figure of the little devil always appeared. "You're too loud. From now on, you need to be quieter." I just thought of something fun. Little White, can you make a little cat sound?" Zhou clapped her hands and laughed. The tiger's roar became even more sorrowful. "I wonder how Uncle is doing. Why hasn't he come back? Little White, do you miss Uncle?" Zhou sighed, patting the tiger's head. The tiger let out a low growl, half-heartedly acknowledging her. At this moment, it was more concerned with how it, a tiger, could mimic a cat's meow. Tai Yin sat cross-legged under the pagoda, his eyes filled with kindness as he watched Zhou Ru. After a long time, he sighed softly. News of Wang Lin's disappearance had long reached the Chu Kingdom. He had kept this from Zhou Ru, but he always believed that with his benefactor's cultivation, he would certainly be able to turn the situation around. His benefactor had said he would return within 9 years, and Tai Yin believed it without a doubt. A look of firm conviction appeared in Tai Yin's eyes. 100 feet away from him, the thunder frog lay lazily in the sun, its huge eyes half closed, showing an expression of pure enjoyment. It hadn't moved from this spot for nearly a year. Staring at the white clouds in the sky, the thunder frog sometimes missed the days spent in the ancient god ruins. Since birth, it had lived there, growing up amidst constant battles. Various demonic beasts fought for food and territory, and fierce battles occurred often. Over the years, the thunder frog had grown stronger, learning to spit out thunderballs. After that, it dominated the ancient god ruins, with few demonic beasts able to challenge it. Now, reflecting on those days, the thunder frog's stomach bulged, and after a moment, it slowly deflated. It thought of Wang Lin, who had brought it out of the ancient god ruins. But, compared to Wang Lin, what it missed more was that mosquito. Time passed slowly, and in the blink of an eye, spring had come and gone, ushering in June. For most people, June might hold no particular significance, but for the outer sect disciples of the soul refining sect in Pilu Kingdom, it was a date of immense importance. This month marked the time for the outer sect grand competition of the soul refining sect. Through a series of eliminations, only one disciple would be chosen from thousands to become an inner sect disciple. On this day, Wang Lin awoke from his seclusion. He slowly opened his eyes, and at first glance, his pupils were as clear as black and white. But upon closer inspection, one could see that his eyes seemed to shimmer with the brilliance of stars, extremely bright. The T marks on his face had grown even fainter, now only 8 remaining. These 8 marks intertwined, forming the key structure for the Sun Tai seal. The small piece of immortal jade he had swallowed was fully absorbed, and under the impact of the seal, it began to shrink drastically. However, complete removal remained elusive. Late nascent soul stage, perfected. Wang Lin murmured to himself. He slowly stood up, took a deep breath, and walked out of his cave mansion. The comprehension I've gained is of the life and death concept within the cycle of reincarnation. The more one sees through life and death, the harder it is to break free. I used to think life was life, and death was death. But through my insights, I now realize that sometimes life is death, and death is life. My life has been filled with killings, and I've seen only the death side of things. The only life I've encountered is the new life of Li Muan. My own rebirth is another form of life, but it's still not enough. Wang Lin walked out of the cave mansion, gazing at the distant mountains, shaking his head gently. After surviving this calamity, my mindset has changed compared to before. Especially during those months in Firecloud Stronghold, I deeply pondered seeing life and death as death, but seeing life not as life and death not as death. These dual understandings correspond to the initial and middle stages of spirit transformation. Wang Lin stood outside his cave mansion, the mountain wind blowing his clothes with a rustling sound. This opportunity has allowed me to gain some clarity. If I can find that unifying point and return to seeing life and death as death, I can break through in my comprehension, reaching the late stage of spirit transformation. But even at the late stage of spirit transformation, fully understanding the life and death concept is difficult. Perfection at this stage also requires completeness and comprehension. However, this perfection is different from that of an infant metamorphosis cultivator. Li Yuanfeng is in the early stages of infant metamorphosis, and his comprehension can actually manifest physically, leaving T-marks on me. This power is clearly beyond what the spirit transformation concept can compare to. It seems that perfection in spirit transformation is just one level. Beyond it, infant metamorphosis cultivators need to gain a deeper and higher understanding. Wang Lin's expression grew thoughtful. At this moment, he hadn't noticed a stunningly beautiful woman in the distance, silently observing him from the entrance of another cave mansion. Her gaze was complex, somewhat confused, with a touch of doubt, yet also a sense of helplessness. Back in the immortal realm, Senior Zhou gave me a questioning crystal. With this, my chances of reaching the questioning stage would improve. This crystal must be a compilation of a cultivator's entire life's comprehension. The questioning stage. I wonder when I, Wang Lin, will ever have the chance to reach it. For now, the seal hasn't been removed, and even infant metamorphosis is still out of reach. Wang Lin sighed lightly. Tian Yunzi took me as his disciple. Perhaps I should seek him out quickly. Maybe there's still a chance to reach the questioning stage. But if I leave with my current cultivation, Situ Nin is still unconscious, and the crystal of mindfulness for the extreme realm is yet to be obtained. I'm reluctant to go. Moreover, the cultivators on the Destiny Star must have higher cultivation levels. Without enough strength, I'll gain no attention from Tian Yunzi if I go there. Wang Lin pondered deeply. Suddenly, he seemed to notice something, turned his head, and immediately met the gaze of the woman in the distance. Who is this woman? Wang Lin's eyes flashed. He leapt towards the cave mansion where the woman stood. The woman withdrew her gaze and stepped back a few paces, making way for him. Wang Lin landed where the woman had stood before, casting a cold glance at her. Her stunning beauty left him unmoved, and he spoke in a low voice. Do you know me? The woman looked at Wang Lin and softly replied, You don't remember me. Wang Lin's gaze flickered, and he stared at the woman for a long time, unable to recall where he had seen her before. The mountain wind blew, causing the woman's dark hair to scatter and drift, giving her the appearance of an otherworldly immortal. She gathered the strands of hair with one hand, placing them behind her ear, and looked up at Wang Lin. She softly said, My name is Lu Mei. Lu Mei. Wang Lin stared at her, and after a pause, he slowly replied, I don't recognize you. Lu Mei sighed softly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Her smile, like a blooming flower, immediately dazzled the surroundings, making everything else seem to fade away. Senior brother Wang Lin, do you really not remember the young man from Xun'er Sect who carried a large sword? When the woman revealed her identity, Wang Lin showed no surprise. He had already guessed it when she mentioned her name was Lu Mei. The Lu Mei I know is the one with the innate water spirit root from the Xindao sect, not a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom. Wang Lin said calmly. Lu Mei was taken aback. This expression was rare on her face. She studied Wang Lin closely and softly asked, "What do you mean by that, senior brother Wang?" Wang Lin didn't respond. He simply gazed at her quietly. After a moment, Lu Mei lowered her head and whispered, "Senior brother Wang, I believe you are misunderstanding. To appear in the Xiandao sect, and even enter the soul refining sect, I don't think any other cultivation nation except the Vermilion Bird Kingdom could achieve that." Wang Lin interrupted, turning and walking away. Lu Mei smiled faintly and said, "So, you've already concluded I am a disciple of the Vermilion Bird Kingdom? Senior brother Wang, are you so sure? I fear you are testing me as well. Senior brother, I won't hide it from you. I, Lu Mei, am indeed from the Vermilion Bird Kingdom." Wang Lin didn't turn around. A hint of mockery appeared in his eyes as he slowly spoke. "A test, huh? I've seen that bracelet of yours on Red Butterfly." As he spoke, Wang Lin gently moved, floating away from the spot. Lu Mei looked down at the bracelet on her arm. Just now, the mountain wind had lifted her sleeve, revealing it. She gazed at Wang Lin's retreating figure and sighed softly, murmuring to herself, "It's been 500 years since we last met, and he's changed greatly. The naive boy from back then is gone. Now his heart is as hard as iron. But what is his Tao heart?" Wang Lin felt a gloom in his heart. The Vermilion Bird Kingdom seemed like a colossal force overshadowing the Vermilion Bird Star. Anyone, no matter where they were, could feel the pressure from the Vermilion Bird Kingdom. The higher one's cultivation, the greater the sensation. Although the Vermilion Bird Kingdom's visit had been brief, the invisible sense of crisis was something Wang Lin could never forget. Whether it was in the immortal cultivation mansion full of mute cultivators or during his battle with Red Butterfly, Wang Lin always felt suffocated, as though an overwhelming force was pressing down on him. It felt like a black curtain covering the sky. Unless one possessed a sword capable of breaking through this darkness, there was no resistance. The Vermilion Bird Kingdom, the overlord of the Vermilion Bird Star. However, in Wang Lin's view, though the Vermilion Bird Kingdom was a ruler, its domain was shrouded in a deathly aura. This death aura wasn't just about life and death. It was an understanding, a realization of losing change, losing vitality. This Vermilion Bird Kingdom has probably reached its end. Wang Lin looked up, his gaze turned towards the distant direction, where the Vermilion Bird Kingdom lay. 2 days later, the grand competition of the soul refining sect began. Over 10,000 outer sect disciples gathered, with over 100 battle arenas set up. Every day, there were multiple skirmishes. Among these outer sect disciples were independent cultivators and those from cultivation families. They had come to the soul refining sect with a single goal. This day, the only rule for the outer sect disciples competition was simple: win. Life or death for the losers didn't matter. If the winner wished to kill, they could. As long as one had the strength, they could even kill everyone, and the sect wouldn't intervene. In fact, there was a rumor among the outer sect disciples. The more people one killed, the greater the chance of being selected. If someone could go on a killing spree, leaving no survivors in their wake, their chances of entering the inner sect would rise to an extraordinary height. This rumor had spread rapidly ever since a few years ago when an outer sect disciple known as the Killing Star had fought their way to the final battle. Though they lost, they were still admitted to the inner sect. This exceptional case caused the rumor to spread like wildfire. Every time the grand competition took place, out of the over 10,000 outer sect disciples, fewer than half would survive. There was never an exception. Those who survived needed to pay more spirit stones to secure their status as outer sect disciples and compete in the next grand competition, hoping to make it into the inner sect. Over the years, no one knew how many outer sect disciples had died in the competition. No one knew either how many souls had been added to the soul banner within the sect after each competition. The entire soul refining sect continued to grow stronger through this brutal process. Every day, countless outer sect disciples perished. The battle arenas, numbering in the hundreds, were almost awash with blood. Wang Lin had been observing over these days. Every time someone died, their soul would be absorbed by the battle platform and disappear. Today was Wang Lin's turn to fight. He silently floated onto the platform, landing on the left side. A core formation cultivator dressed in a black robe was presiding over this arena. He shot Wang Lin a cold glance, and a shock ran through his heart. To him, this person's cultivation level was on par with his own. It wasn't common to see such a cultivator among the outer sect disciples. He spoke coldly. 8972. Prepare for battle. A low shout came from among the surrounding disciples. Then, a short, plump man leapt forward like a massive meatball crashing onto the platform. Without saying a word, he immediately formed hand seals. Clusters of fireballs appeared before him, resembling a fiery rain. With a single point of his finger, they shot toward Wang Lin. Late Foundation establishment stage. Wang Lin shook his head. This time, to gain entry into the inner sect, he had deliberately restrained his cultivation to the mid-core formation stage. With a wave of his right hand, his body leapt down from the platform. The moment he moved, the short and plump cultivator shuddered. All the fireballs vanished into thin air, and his head lolled to the side as he collapsed unconscious. Wang Lin hadn't killed him. To kill a mere Foundation Establishment Junior would be beneath him. As time passed, a large number of outer sect disciples lost their lives. 7 days later, out of over 10,000 disciples, only 100 had advanced to the next round. More than half had perished. The rest either forfeited early or ended up in mutual defeat, narrowly escaping death. During those 7 days, four disciples drew the attention of the soul-refining sect. One of them was an old man with a head full of gray hair. His cultivation had reached the late core formation stage. Along his path, every opponent he encountered was slain using the same technique. This spell resembled some mysterious divine technique. He would merely point through the air, utter the word die, and the enemy would drop dead. The moment Wang Lin saw this spell, a thought flashed through his mind. Extreme Realm. He was momentarily stunned. But on closer inspection, he realized that while the technique shared some similarities, it was fundamentally different. Death Curse Art. Wang Lin murmured to himself, finally identifying the spell. Back in the demonic sea, his own extreme realm had once been mistaken for this very art. It was during that time that he first learned anything about the Death Curse Art. Cultivating this technique was incredibly arduous. In all his 500 years of cultivation, this was the first time Wang Lin had seen someone actually wield it. The second person was a thin, undersized youth. Though only at the early core formation stage, he possessed a beast-like instinct. He could sense the fluctuation of spiritual energy before any spell was cast and respond accordingly. While this ability might be useless against higher-level cultivators, within the same stage it was like possessing divine foresight, unmatched and unchallenged. Even with Wang Lin's composure, he couldn't help but feel a fondness for talent when he saw this boy. He briefly considered taking him as a disciple, though the thought was eventually dismissed. The third person was someone Wang Lin recognized. It was the burly man from Cave Mansion 743. He wielded a powerful magical artifact, a talisman paper that allowed him to slaughter countless opponents. Every cultivator who faced him had died by its power. As for the fourth, it was Wang Lin himself. With effortless grace, he rendered every disciple he encountered unconscious with a single motion. Naturally, this attracted attention. But that had been his intention all along. Only by standing out would his eventual entrance into the inner sect not seem unexpected. As for Willow Eyebrows, Wang Lin was certain she had approached him with a purpose. Even if she didn't appear in the grand competition, she would undoubtedly find another way into the inner sect. Time flew. Another 7 days passed. The 100 selected disciples were once again subjected to brutal elimination. In the end, only 4 remained. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, these 4 were the very ones who had caught the attention of the soul-refining sect. On this day, it was Wang Lin's turn to take the stage. He stood atop the platform, looking at the opponent who had just stepped up, a strange smile curling his lips. The one who appeared was none other than the burly man from Cave Mansion 743. The duel was overseen by a nascent soul cultivator at the early nascent soul stage from the soul-refining sect. He was middle-aged, with graying temples. His eyes swept across the platform, and he said coldly, "Begin." The moment his voice fell, the burly man gave a bitter smile and sighed inwardly. He quickly said, "I concede." The nascent soul cultivator paused, eyeing him. "You concede?" The burly man nodded repeatedly. "I concede." As he spoke, he hurried off the platform, heart pounding wildly. Damn it. I still have that guy's restriction seal in my body. If I don't concede, he won't even need to lift a finger. One thought from him, and I'd be crippled on the spot. Off the stage, he immediately turned and looked at Wang Lin with a fawning expression. Wang Lin let out a chuckle and shook his head slightly before stepping down. The nascent soul cultivator gave Wang Lin a deep look, but said nothing and moved on to oversee the next match. The battle between the old man who had mastered the death curse art and the youth with terrifying instincts ended swiftly. The youth stood no chance against the death curse art. Just as he was about to be killed, a beam of spiritual light flew out from within the soul-refining sect, encircling and saving him at the last moment. With that, only 2 contestants remained in the outer sect grand competition, Wang Lin and the old man named Sima. Their battle was set for the following day. On the platform, Sima's gaze was dark and brooding. He had spent many years in the harsh practice of the death curse art, all for this moment. Once he achieved ultimate victory and became an inner disciple of the soul-refining sect, he believed that he would undoubtedly reach the nascent soul formation one day. Moreover, the soul banner technique of the soul-refining sect had certain overlaps with the death curse art he practiced. According to his master, training both together would bring results of an unimaginable degree, almost matching the legendary extreme realm, a realm lost to time, with only the smallest difference. Thinking of his master, a flash of fervor appeared in Sima's eyes. In his mind, his master was incredibly powerful. Even a nascent soul cultivator would instantly crumble upon hearing his master's death command, and even spirit transformation cultivators rarely managed to escape. In his eyes, his master's cultivation was more than enough to challenge an infant metamorphosis monster. The death curse art is unstoppable unless your opponent's cultivation vastly exceeds yours, his master's voice echoed in his mind. This art was created by ancient cultivators who, after failing to comprehend the extreme realm, mimicked it to create a divine technique. If cultivated to its extreme, it might even grant a trace of the extreme realm's power. His master's words always resonated in his ears. Sima's gaze was firm as he looked at the last enemy of this battle. The young man in front of him, named Qing Mu, was nothing in his eyes. A murderous gleam flashed in his eyes, and with a flick of his right hand, he lowly commanded, "Die." With his words, the death curse art erupted in an instant.